The cold wind sliced through the wooden cracks of an old, forgotten home nestled deep in the hills of a remote Tagalog town. In that crumbling house, where shadows danced more than light, lived a boy named Elian, quiet, thin, with eyes that held more pain than years. He had grown up being called cursed. Whispers followed him wherever he went. Neighbors crossed the street when he passed. Children threw rocks at his window at night. His mother had died when he was 6. Some said it was sickness. Others claimed something darker took her. His father? No one ever spoke of him. Elian lived with his grandmother, Lola Ina, a woman both feared and pitied. With skin like dried leaves and a voice like rustling cloth, she barely spoke and rarely left her corner of the house. People said she was once an albulario, a healer, but had turned away from the light after her daughter's death. The house smelled of burnt herbs and something that always hinted of decay. Yet in the middle of all this was Benjo, Elian's only friend. Benjo was the complete opposite. Loud, cheerful, always eating, always joking. No one understood why he chose to stay friends with someone like Elian. But he did, and that made the quiet unbearable when Benjo wasn't around. It started with a dream. Elian had always been haunted by nightmares. His mother screaming, walls bleeding, shadows whispering secrets. But that night, the dream was different. He stood in the middle of a field of ashes, under a sky with no stars, no moon. Everything was silent, until he heard his name, whispered not by a voice, but by something deeper, something cold. The earth cracked open before him, and from the fissure rose a hand, pale, bony, its fingers curled in a beckoning motion. He woke up sweating, heart racing, and the air in his room had turned icy cold. The next morning, Benjo laughed it off. Maybe you just need to eat more garlic, he joked, tossing Elian a clove from Lola Ina's kitchen. But Elian couldn't laugh, because that day, as they walked past the river, they saw a dead goat lying in the reeds, its eyes wide open, and its mouth stretched in a silent scream. Weird, Benjo muttered. Looks like its blood was drained. That night, Elian found his window open, even though he'd shut it before sleeping. On the floor, a trail of black feathers led from the sill to under his bed. When he checked, nothing was there, but the air smelled like rain and rot. The days that followed blurred together with strange happenings. Dogs barked at Elian whenever he passed. Trees seemed to lean toward him. He heard footsteps behind him at night, but saw nothing when he turned. His dreams grew darker. He saw a woman with no eyes sitting in Lola Ina's rocking chair, whispering secrets to the walls. He saw hands reaching through the ground during storms. He saw a figure in the mirror that wasn't his reflection. Then one afternoon, as he helped Lola Ina grind herbs, she looked up at him for the first time in days. Her eyes, cloudy and tired, were filled with something close to fear. "It's waking," she said in a dry whisper. "What is?" Elian asked, his voice small. But she didn't answer. Instead, that night, she gave him an old wooden box. It was carved with strange markings, and inside was a cracked mutia, an old talisman shaped like a teardrop. She told him it was once worn by his mother, that it had protected her, until it didn't. Elian clutched the mutia as he lay in bed, watching shadows crawl across the ceiling. The next day, Benjo and Elian decided to visit the old caves beyond the hills, a place kids often dared each other to go. But no one really did. It was said to be haunted. Of course, Benjo joked about it, tossing rocks, laughing loudly to scare the spirits away. But deep inside the cave, the air grew thick, cold, and unnatural. The walls were damp, and symbols lined the stone in patterns Elian felt his eyes shouldn't see. He tripped, and when Benjo helped him up, they saw something carved into the wall. "The blood of the cursed calls them back." Elian didn't understand, but his mutia glowed faintly. That night, he asked Lola Ina again. She told him the truth in pieces, how their bloodline once held power, how his mother had tried to suppress it, and how something dark had followed their family for generations. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't even a spirit. It was something older, waiting to be called back into the world. The curse wasn't just a rumor. It was their legacy. And it was feeding on Elian's pain, his isolation, his nightmares. Benjo stayed over that night, trying to cheer him up with ghost stories and dry jokes. They laughed, just for a moment. It felt like a break in the storm. For a second, Elian forgot the fear. But then, they heard scratching behind the wall. At first, they thought it was rats. But then the scratching turned into tapping. Rhythmic, purposeful. Talp, talp, talp. Silence. Then a voice, faint like wind sliding across dead leaves. "Let me in." Benjo froze. "Tell me that was you," he whispered. Elian shook his head slowly. The mutia burned hot against his chest. They didn't sleep that night. The next day, Lola Ina was gone. Her chair empty. Her herbs scattered. On the wall behind her seat, someone or something had scratched a message in blood. "The door is opening." The silence in the house after Lola Ina vanished was deafening. Elian stared at the empty rocking chair, unable to move. Benjo stood behind him, too scared to speak. The air felt heavier, like something unseen had been awakened and was now watching them closely. The faint smell of burnt herbs lingered in the room, mixed with something foul, like soil freshly turned from a grave. On the floor near the chair, something glinted. Elian picked it up. It was an old comb, blackened with time, its teeth sharp like tiny fangs. He remembered seeing it before, tucked in a tin box Lola Ina kept under her altar. He didn't know what it meant, but it felt wrong in his hands. He placed it beside the glowing mutia he wore on a string around his neck. The stone had become warmer ever since Lola Ina disappeared, as if it knew she was gone. Benjo tried to act brave. Maybe she just wanted to get help. You know, an albulario or something. But deep down, they both knew that wasn't true. That night, Elian dreamed again. This time, he wasn't in a field, but in the middle of a dense forest. The trees whispered his name, their bark carved with symbols like the ones in the cave. In the clearing stood his mother, hair covering her face, holding a bundle of dried leaves in one hand and a blade made of bone in the other. She raised her head slowly and said, "You were never meant to be ordinary." He woke with a jolt, his chest heaving. His mutia burned like fire against his skin. The next day, a strange old man appeared in the village. No one knew his name. He wore a long brown robe, a string of bones around his neck, and his eyes, milky white, like he hadn't seen daylight in years. Yet he walked with certainty, like he knew exactly where he was going. He knocked on Elian's door just before sunset. "You're the boy who dreams of the forest," he said, voice raspy like dry leaves. "Your grandmother sent me." Elian and Benjo exchanged glances. The man introduced himself as Mancario, once a known albulario, now more spirit than man. He claimed he had helped Elian's mother long ago, before she tried to cut ties with the dark inheritance of their bloodline. "You think you're cursed," Mancario said, his voice low. "But it's not a curse, it's a call. One that only awakens when something ancient stirs." He explained that Elian came from a bloodline once tasked with guarding the border between the living and the hidden world, what some called the Dalim, a place older than the mountains, where beings like Aswangs, Tyanak, and other creatures waited for the right moment to return. Long ago, one of Elian's ancestors betrayed that duty, allowing a dark entity to cross. Since then, the family line had been plagued with nightmares, madness, and early deaths. "Your mother tried to protect you," Mancario continued. "She sealed the passage, but now the seal is weakening." Elian wanted to reject all of it. He was just a boy, not a warrior, not a gatekeeper. But the things he'd seen, the dreams, the voices, the cold spots in his room, they were real. Benjo, trying to lighten the mood, asked, "So what? He's like a horror version of a superhero." Mang Cario didn't laugh. Instead, he pulled out a small pouch from his cloak and handed it to Elian. Inside was a broken Kabibi shell with etchings on the inside, the same markings from a cave. "This is your key, the last remaining piece from the original seal. It was hidden in your family's belongings for years." That night, under Mang Cario's guidance, Elian began his first ritual. He was told to burn dried herbs, chant ancient words that sounded like forgotten prayers, and place the Mutia and Kabibi beside each other under the moonlight. As the smoke filled the room, images began to flicker before his eyes. His mother crying while drawing sigils on the floor, Lola Aina burying something in the garden, a group of shadowed figures watching from the edge of the woods. The next few days were filled with training. Not physical strength, but awareness. Mang Cario taught him how to sense shifts in energy, how to read the sky and the wind. He taught him how to guard his dreams and protect his spirit during sleep. But it wasn't easy. Every lesson came with a cost. Elian would wake up with scratches on his arms. One morning, he coughed up black water. The dark world was testing him, pulling at his fear. At one point, he even considered walking away. "I didn't choose this," Elian said. "No one does," Mang Cario replied. "But someone always must carry it." Benjo stayed close, trying to keep Elian sane. They still had short moments of laughter, silly jokes, memories of simpler days. But even Benjo could feel the growing tension. Then came the signs. Dead birds on their doorstep, cracks appearing on mirrors without anyone touching them. A neighbor found lifeless near the river, his face twisted in terror, his chest hollowed out. The townspeople began whispering again. But this time, it wasn't just about Elian. They spoke of the Aswangs returning, of a shadow flying across rooftops at night, of the old cave glowing with a strange blue light. Elian's fear turned to urgency. Mang Cario warned that the creature they were facing wasn't an ordinary Aswang. It was an elder being, one that had once ruled part of the Dalim, sealed long ago by Elian's great-grandmother. Now, its prison was weakening. The moment it fully crosses, Cario said, "This village won't survive." Still, doubt gnawed at Elian. Could he really face this? He had no weapons, no real power, just nightmares and a family legacy he never asked for. On the 7th night of his training, he received one final vision. He stood in front of a door, huge, wooden, carved with runes that shimmered. Behind it, something pulsed. Alive, hungry, waiting. Then the door began to creak open. He screamed, but no sound came out. He reached for the door to shut it and woke up, breathless. When he looked down, the Kabibi was glowing faintly, and the Mutia around his neck was cold. The door had started to open, for real, and time was running out. Elian sat at the edge of the creek, the cool water running over his bare feet, but he couldn't feel any comfort from it. The Mutia around his neck had lost its warmth. The Kabibi in his pocket had stopped glowing. Something was different now. He could feel it in the air. Something had changed, something inside him. He glanced at the horizon. The sun was setting again, casting long shadows across the trees. Each sunset felt heavier now, like the world itself was dreading the coming night. Benjo sat quietly beside him, chewing on a stick, unsure of what to say. They had been through strange days, stranger than anything they'd ever imagined. But now, the silence between them carried the weight of a truth that Elian hadn't shared yet. Earlier that day, Mang Cario gave him something else, an old journal wrapped in cloth. It belonged to his mother. Inside were notes, scribbles, pages stained with tears and blood. There were drawings of the sigils she carved into the walls before she vanished. One entry stood out, written in rushed handwriting. If Elian finds this, I'm sorry. I try to keep it away from him, but the bloodline won't let go. His father, he was one of them. That single line shattered something inside Elian. His whole life, he thought his father abandoned them out of shame or poverty. But no, his father had been part of the threat, a servant of the dark, possibly even one of the creatures they now feared. Elian felt hollow, betrayed, lied to by the people he loved, and now he was expected to be the one to save everyone. He wanted to scream, to tear the Mutia from his neck, and run until he reached the end of the world. But something deeper held him still, a sense that if he ran, there would be nothing left to return to. That night, the wind howled louder than before. Elian dreamed again, this time of a child crying inside a tree. When he approached, the bark peeled open like skin, revealing his own face, but twisted and monstrous, eyes glowing red. "You're one of us," the creature hissed. He woke up choking on dirt. His fingernails were muddy, and there were scratches on his arms, too fresh to be just a dream. "Something's getting closer," Mancario said, inspecting the marks. "It's testing you." Benjo was growing worried, too. He noticed the animals in their area were disappearing. Cats gone, dogs howling for no reason. Even the birds that used to nest on their roof had flown away. Then, one afternoon, the two of them were walking near the edge of the woods when they heard it, a soft, familiar voice. "Elian," he froze. It was his mother's voice. "Elian." Enoch, Benjo didn't hear it, but Elian followed the sound like he was under a spell. It led him to the old well near the abandoned chapel, where no one dared go anymore. There, standing in front of it, was a woman with long hair covering her face. Her arms were thin, and she wore the same dress his mother wore in his dream. "Elian, come," she whispered. He took a step forward, unsure, trembling. But something in the air shifted. The wind stopped. Everything became too quiet. Benjo ran up and pulled it back just in time. The woman let out a shriek, her face lifting to reveal a hollow space where eyes should have been. Her mouth opened impossibly wide, and her fingers stretched like claws. She vanished into smoke. "That wasn't your mom," Benjo panted. "It was bait. They're messing with your memories." Back at Mancario's hut, the old man confirmed it. "They know you're beginning to accept what you are, so they're twisting your pain, using it to break you." Elian didn't speak for a long time. That night, he sat by himself, staring at the Kabibi. What if he really was like his father? What if the blood inside him was calling to the dark instead of resisting it? He began to feel something inside him, unfamiliar energy. It wasn't just fear. It was power, quiet, dormant, but real, and it scared him. He remembered Lola Ina's last words before she vanished. "Don't let the door open." What door? Was it literal? Was it already halfway open? The next evening, a village elder came running, blood on his clothes. Something had attacked his granddaughter near the rice fields. They found her trembling, her mouth sewn shut with black thread, like something wanted her to never speak again. Mancario looked grim. The shadows are sending warnings. Elian knew what he had to do. He couldn't run from this anymore. He asked Cario to teach him more, not just how to protect, but how to fight. He wanted to learn how to close the rift, or at least keep the creatures at bay. Training became more brutal. Mancario guided him through rituals with fire and smoke. He chanted protection spells that burned his throat. He learned how to draw sigils with his blood, how to spot glamours hiding monsters in plain sight. But each lesson cost him. He barely slept. His body thinned. The shadows in his dreams no longer waited for him to fall asleep. They followed him even in the day. Benjo tried to help, always at his side. But Elian had become distant, lost in his thoughts, haunted by the image of his mother and the truth of his father. One night, while meditating, Elian had a vision. He stood on the edge of a cliff, staring down at a massive gate. The wood was blackened, the carvings ancient and glowing faintly. From beyond it, a deep hum echoed, a heartbeat, slow and dangerous. On the gate was a symbol, the same one on the Kabibi. Then he saw a figure beside the gate, tall, thin, eyes glowing red. It spoke without moving its mouth. "You carry our blood. Open the door, Elian. Be what you were born to be." He screamed and woke up, heart pounding. The next morning, he found new symbols drawn on the walls of his home, ones he didn't remember carving. Mang Cario stared at them, troubled. "It's begun. You're being tested from the inside now." Elian had no words. He felt like he was being pulled in two directions. The blood of his father calling him toward the dark, the memory of his mother pulling him toward the light, and in between, the fate of his village and maybe something even bigger. As the sun dipped behind the trees, Binjo placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to be like him," he said softly. "You've always been better." Elian nodded, but his eyes were locked on the forest. Something was coming. He could feel it in his bones. The real battle hadn't begun yet, but it was close. Very close. The nights had become colder, unnaturally cold. Even with no wind, Elian could feel the chill crawling into his bones. The fire they built near Mang Cario's hut no longer gave comfort. It flickered weakly, like it too was afraid. He stared into the flames, his hands clenched around the Kabibi. The carvings on it had changed. Before, they glowed faintly, but now they pulsed like a beating heart. It was reacting to something, but he didn't know if it was warning him or calling him toward it. 3 signs, Mang Cario whispered behind him. 3 signs before the darkness fully rises. The animals have vanished. The children dream of fire. And tonight, the wind won't return. Elian didn't know what to say. He was exhausted. Every night, the dreams became worse. Sometimes he woke up screaming. Sometimes he found blood on his sheets, even if there were no wounds. The boundary between the waking world and whatever was out there was starting to blur. Binjo sat nearby, sharpening a wooden stake, the kind they'd learned to use against Mananangels and Sigbin. But there was doubt in his movements, his eyes unfocused, his hands trembling slightly. They were both scared. "We're not ready," Binjo muttered. Elian looked at him. "I don't think we'll ever be." The next day, the trees around the village began to rot. Leaves shriveled even without wind or rain. Some bark cracked open and leaked dark sap that smelled of rust and decay. The birds that remained flew in circles, never landing, as if lost. Villagers came to Mang Cario's hut in fear. They'd heard whispers in the night, soft voices calling them by name. One child said she saw her dead brother smiling in the fields, beckoning her closer. Her mother found her walking into the swamp with her eyes closed. It was clear. The enemy was no longer hiding. It was preparing. Elian knew he had little time left. He had to make a choice soon. Confront the source of the evil, or wait and let it consume everything. But doubt still lingered. Inside him was the same blood that ran in his father's veins, the man who had once served the darkness. Mang Cario tried to reassure him, saying it wasn't the blood that defined a person, but the choices they made. But it wasn't that simple. Every time Elian closed his eyes, he felt a second heartbeat, one that wasn't his. It echoed from the Kabibi, from the forest, from somewhere deep beneath the earth. One afternoon, while meditating near the creek, Elian had a vision. He saw a field of skulls. They were buried in shallow dirt, mouths open in silent screams. Above them stood a woman, tall and shadowy, her hands dripping with black ink that turned into smoke. Her face was hidden, but when she turned, he knew it was his mother, or at least something wearing her face. "You open the gate," she whispered. Elian jolted awake, gasping. Water splashed as he stood, chest heaving. Across from him, Binjo stared wide-eyed. "Your eyes were glowing," he said. Elian touched his face. Everything felt normal. But deep inside, something had shifted. The vision didn't feel like a dream. It felt like a warning or a memory. Later that night, Mancario gave him a map. It was carved into a dried leaf, brittle but warm to the touch. On it was a path that led deep into the forest, into an area no one dared enter. "The heart of the Black Tree," the old man said. "That's where the curse began, and where it must end." Elian stared at the path, his throat dry. "Will we make it out alive?" Mancario looked away. "No one ever has. But no one like you has tried." The next few days were spent in preparation. Binjo gathered supplies: salt, blessed ash, sharpened bamboo. Elian spent hours in silent meditation, trying to silence the second heartbeat, trying to remind himself who he was. But every time he looked in the mirror, his reflection seemed a little off. Eyes too dark, smile too slow to form. He wondered if part of him was already slipping. Then the worst happened. One of the villagers, a kind old woman who often gave them rice, was found hanging upside down in her hut. Her body was drained of blood, her eyes wide open, mouth stitched shut with a thorny vine. On her chest was carved the symbol from Elian's Kabibi. This was no longer just war. It was personal. They were coming for him, testing his resolve, trying to break his spirit before the real battle. Binjo couldn't stop shaking after seeing the body. How can we fight something that gets inside people's heads, that makes them see what they want or fear the most? Elian had no answer, but something burned inside him now. Not just fear or doubt, but anger. Fury at being hunted, at being used, at seeing good people die. He stood up, clutched the Kabibi, and made a vow. "If this ends with me, then so be it, but it ends." Mancario gave them each a pouch of dust, made from burnt roots and bones. "Use it when the air grows still. It'll show you what hides in the dark." That night, as they packed their bags and prepared to leave, the sky turned red. No sun, no stars, just red. The villagers locked their doors. Even the crickets went silent. As they crossed the edge of the forest, Elian looked back once, knowing this might be the last time. Binjo walked beside him, silent but firm. They didn't speak. They just moved forward. Trees grew closer together, the air thicker, harder to breathe. Shadows moved between trunks. Sometimes Elian saw glimpses of faces, familiar ones, distorted and twisted, whispering his name. He clutched the Kabibi harder. They reached the old boundary line marked with bones and stones. The earth beyond it was black, dry, and cracked. "Elian," Binjo whispered, pointing. Ahead of them, barely visible, was a massive tree, taller than anything they'd seen. Its branches twisted into the sky, leafless, bark oozing black sap. Around its base were figures, some crawling, some standing, some just watching. The heart of the Black Tree. And it was awake. Suddenly, the ground shook. A loud, deep hum vibrated through the air, like a monstrous throat clearing before a scream. Elian dropped to one knee, holding his chest. The second heartbeat was louder now, matching his own. His vision blurred. "Elian, focus!" Binjo shouted, throwing salt into the air. The world snapped back. The tree groaned, branches twitching. One of the crawling figures turned toward them, its eyes hollow, face rotting but familiar. It was Elian's father, still moving, still waiting, but not alone. From behind the tree, something huge stirred. The final darkness hadn't come yet, but its shadow had already arrived. And Elian knew the next step would decide not just his fate, but the fate of every soul still breathing. The branches of the Black Tree trembled like they were breathing, slow, heavy, angry breaths. Every inch Elian took forward made the air around him colder, heavier. The ground beneath him cracked like old bones. Beside him, Binjo gripped his bamboo spear tighter, his lips whispering prayers he barely remembered. They had no plan, just the Kabibi, some tools, and the courage they stitched together with every loss they had endured. But something shifted. As Elian stepped closer to the base of the tree, a sudden force slammed into his chest. Not physical, but emotional, like someone had ripped open his heart and poured in memories that weren't his. Visions flashed before him. A young man kneeling before the same tree, offering a baby wrapped in cloth. The woman from his visions, his mother, crying silently in the shadows. Then the man turned, and Elian saw his own face. He stumbled back. "What was that?" Binjo asked, helping him up. Elian couldn't speak. The image was burned in his mind. It didn't make sense. That couldn't have been him. It was someone else, but with his face. Or maybe it was a version of him from another time. Mancario once said curses run in circles. That time folds in on itself when something unnatural is left unbroken. Elian never really understood that until now. A deep, ancient voice echoed from the tree. Not from a mouth, but from inside the wood, as if the bark itself had a soul. "Return what was promised." Binjo looked at Elian in horror. "What did you promise it?" Elian shook his head. "I never did. I swear." But the voice replied again. "You did. In another life." That night, they camped far from the tree, just within earshot of its low groaning. Binjo kept watch while Elian stared at the Kabibi, trying to make sense of it all. The carvings now formed a full circle, a spiral pattern, glowing like embers. As he closed his eyes, something changed. He was pulled into another vision, no longer of his own memories, but those of someone else. This time, he saw a woman in white, walking barefoot through a burning village. Around her, monsters bowed, Tikbalang, Manananggal, Sigbin, all kneeling like servants. In her hand was a necklace, the same Kabibi he held now. When she reached the center of the flame, she whispered a name, Elian. He snapped out of it, breathing heavily. The woman in the vision wasn't just anyone. It was his grandmother. And she wasn't just a victim of the curse. She helped create it. Back in the village, Mancario had hinted that Elian's family had dark roots. But he never mentioned that one of their blood had led the monsters. The curse wasn't just chasing Elian. It was trying to reclaim him. He was the heir to the one who started it all. The revelation crushed him. All his training, his courage, suddenly felt fake, like he was just a puppet dancing toward a role he never chose. Was that why the tree called him by name? Why his visions felt too real? Why the enemy never tried to kill him? Only pull him closer. The next morning, they were ambushed. Not by monsters, but by people. A group of villagers, half of them from Elian's hometown, came out of the trees with weapons, their eyes glazed over, their mouths twitching in strange smiles. Binjo raised his spear. "What are you doing?" The oldest among them, a woman with gray hair and bloody hands, replied calmly, "We serve the old ways. The blood must return to the roots. He is the final piece." Elian stood still. He knew now they were followers, worshippers of the dark magic planted by his grandmother. Maybe even descendants of the first villagers cursed generations ago. They didn't want to stop the darkness. They wanted to restore it. A fight broke out. Binjo tried to protect Elian, but they were outnumbered. Elian used the Kabibi instinctively, lifting it to the sky. A sudden blast of light burst from the spiral carvings, throwing their attackers back. But the power drained him. He dropped to his knees. The followers didn't die. They retreated into the trees, laughing like they had just tested him and liked what they saw. "They're not here to kill me," Elian said weakly. "They want me to join." Binjo helped him up. "And will you?" No, Elian whispered, though part of him wasn't sure. That night, they returned to Mang Cario's hut. The old man was waiting, his face more pale than usual. "You saw the truth," he said without being told. Elian nodded. "I'm the blood that started this." Mang Cario shook his head. "You are the blade that will end it." Elian wanted to believe him, but the pull was stronger now. At night, he dreamed of walking through the tree, of vines wrapping around his arms like welcome embraces. He saw his grandmother's eyes in every flame. He stopped sleeping. Benjo tried to stay positive, but the darkness was changing them both. They'd lost the line between reality and the spirit world. Every whisper in the trees sounded like a command. Every face they passed looked hollow. They weren't just fighting monsters anymore. They were fighting their own blood. Elian sat alone one evening, staring at the Kabibi. He thought of throwing it away, of ending the cycle by ending himself. But when he held it up to the moonlight, he saw something new, an image etched into the shell that hadn't been there before. A broken chain, and underneath, one word in ancient script. Pilian, choose. It hit him like thunder. The curse wasn't about punishment, it was about a choice. Every generation had a chance to continue or stop it. His grandmother chose power. His father chose silence. Now he had to choose. That realization lit a spark inside him. He stood, steadier than before. The final confrontation was near, but now he wasn't just fighting for the village or to break the curse. He was fighting to prove that blood didn't decide fate. That night, the earth shook again. This time, the tree didn't just groan. It screamed. 1,000 voices echoed through the air, some weeping, some laughing, some calling his name with tenderness and hate at the same time. The black tree was waking. The followers were gathering. And Elian knew this was the storm before the storm. And no one, not even him, would leave unchanged. The night air was thick with the scent of smoke and damp earth. Elian stood in front of the black tree, the Kabibi clenched tightly in his fist. Around him, the world had changed. The forest was no longer quiet. Shadows moved where there should have been none. Whispers floated in the wind like prayers gone wrong. Benjo stood beside him, eyes fixed on the tree. He didn't speak anymore. None of them did. They just knew. This was it. From the darkness, the followers returned. Not hiding, not crawling. They marched like a silent army, faces painted with blood, voices chanting in a tongue that felt older than the soil itself. At their center stood the woman from Elian's visions, glowing faintly, her long white dress dragging behind her like a funeral veil. His grandmother, not just her spirit, but her full form, raised by the tree, half human, half something else. Her skin shimmered with roots and bark, her hands twisted like branches. "Elian," she spoke, voice like wine through the dead. "You have come home." Elian's heart raced, but he stood firm. "I didn't come to join you." A smile touched her lips. "You already have. It's in your blood. You awakened the Kabibi. You saw the truth. You belong to us." Benjo gripped Elian's arm. "We don't have to do this. We can still run." But Elian shook his head. "No, if we run, we'll always be hunted. I have to end this." The tree pulsed with a deep red glow. The roots writhed like snakes, reaching toward Elian. He raised the Kabibi, and it shone like lightning. The spiral pattern turned, slowly at first, then faster, pulling the wind around him into a whirl. The followers screamed, not in fear, but in ecstasy, as if this was the moment they had waited for. His grandmother extended her hand. "Give it to me, Apo. Let me carry the burden for you. You don't have to suffer anymore." And for a split second, Elian felt it, the temptation, the longing to surrender, to be accepted, to be part of something powerful after a lifetime of rejection. But in that same breath, he saw Benjo's face, his only friend, the one who never left. No, Elian whispered and turned the Kabibi inward, placing it against his chest. A surge of pain exploded through him, as if every memory, every lie, every curse carved into his blood was being pulled out. He fell to his knees, screaming. Benjo tried to reach him, but the roots blocked the way, circling around Elian like a cage. The grandmother's voice rose. He chooses us, but then light. A blinding, burning light burst from the Kabibi, cutting through the roots, the followers, the tree itself. Screams turned into wails. The forest trembled. Elian stood, his eyes glowing, his body no longer just flesh, but something more. The Kabibi had fused into his chest, spiraling like a beating heart. He walked forward. Each step broke the ground with thunder. The followers fell to their knees, clawing at their faces as if the light was peeling away their illusions. You fed on fear, Elian shouted, voice echoing unnaturally. On pain, on blood. It ends now. His grandmother's form twisted, bark cracking, vines flailing. You can't destroy me. I am you. Elian raised both hands. Then I'll destroy myself, if I have to. A final pulse erupted from his body, white and gold, blinding and pure. It slammed into the black tree, shattering its bark, splintering the roots. The ground split open, swallowing the followers whole. His grandmother reached for him, one last time, then faded into dust. The forest fell silent. The black tree, once towering and alive, was now a dead, hollow husk, cracked in two like a broken tooth. The sky cleared. The strange wind stopped, and Elian collapsed. Benjo ran to him, shaking his shoulders. Elian, wake up, please. For a while, nothing. Then Elian coughed, weak but alive. Did it work? Benjo laughed and cried at once. You did it, you crazy idiot. But as they stood, something in the wind shifted again, just slightly. Not violent, not evil, but watchful. Elian looked down at the spiral on his chest. It was still there, dim now, but not gone. Benjo noticed it too. You're still marked. Elian nodded. I broke the curse, but I'm still part of it. The Kabibi chose me. I think I'll carry it forever. From the shadows, Mancario appeared, old but smiling. You broke the chain. The forest is free now. But curses they leave echoes. Benjo looked at him. What do we do now? Mancario placed a hand on Elian's shoulder. Now you choose how to live. Elian looked around. The broken roots, the empty sky, the forest now quiet. For the first time in his life, he felt something strange, not peace, but purpose. He walked to what was left of the tree and placed his hand on the bark. It was cold, lifeless, but under his touch, a small green leaf sprouted. He smiled. Then, just as they turned to leave, a final gust of wind whispered through the forest. Elian, a child's voice. Soft, sad. They all froze. From the cracked bark of the tree, a faint outline formed. A small boy, eyes glowing faintly. Not evil, not cursed, just lost. Elian stepped closer. The boy smiled. Thank you, and vanished. Benjo whispered, Was that? Elian nodded slowly. A soul, set free. They walked away from the ruins of the black tree, not as victims, not even as heroes, but as survivors. The curse was broken, but its story would live on. And somewhere deep in the earth, beneath the forest, the last echoes of a grandmother's voice faded into silence. But the spiral never truly ended. It just waited for the next story to begin. The sun had finally risen. For the first time in weeks, the forest around the village was quiet. Not the eerie, breath-holding silence of fear, but a calm that felt like healing. The black tree had crumbled into a hollow shell. Its roots no longer pulsed with whispers. No more shadows moved against the light. Elian stood at the edge of the clearing, breathing in deeply. The air was different, lighter, as if the land had been holding its breath for years and was now finally exhaling. But inside Elian, the heaviness hadn't completely gone away. The spiral mark on his chest still glowed faintly beneath his shirt. Not threatening, not burning, just there, like a reminder of everything that happened, of everything he had lost and gained. Benjo limped up beside him, arms scratched, face tired but smiling. "We're alive," he said, trying to sound cheerful. Elian nodded. "Yeah, barely." They both sat on a fallen log, looking out at the remains of the tree. For a long time, neither of them spoke, until Benjo asked, "What now?" Elian looked up at the sky, cloudless and soft. "We go home." But that was the hard part, because the meaning of home had changed. When Elian returned to the village, many stared, some with awe, others with fear. Some were silent, not sure how to treat the boy who had once been the outcast, now the one who broke the curse. Old Nene Pina wept when she saw him. "I knew you were meant for something," she whispered, holding his hand. "I just didn't know it would be this painful." Mancario stayed near, always watching, guiding him quietly. The old man had no more spells to cast, no more riddles, just stories and silent prayers. The other villagers slowly returned to the forest, curious to see if it had really changed. And they saw it, green growing where rot once ruled. Animals returning. The air no longer cold. The fear lifting. But for Elian, peace was not immediate. At night, he still heard whispers. Not dark ones, just echoes. Reminders. He sometimes dreamed of the boy who appeared at the tree, the child who said thank you. Elian didn't know who the boy was. Maybe a soul trapped by the curse, maybe someone tied to his family's sins. But in that smile, Elian saw forgiveness. One day, Benjo found him sitting by the old hut where Elian used to sleep, the same place where his mother left him long ago. Benjo asked, "Do you ever wonder if she knew what you become?" Elian didn't answer right away. He looked at the cracked door, the broken floor, the roof patched with leaves. Then he said softly, "Maybe she was running from the same curse and didn't want me to inherit it." Benjo sat beside him. "But you did, and you still faced it." "She left me," Elian whispered. "But maybe that was her way of trying to protect me. Or maybe she was just afraid." A silence settled between them. Then Elian stood. "I want to know more. About her. About our family. About everything." Benjo smiled. "Then we'll find out." Days turned into weeks. Elian helped rebuild the village, clearing fields, fixing homes, gathering food with the others. He wasn't the same boy they once rejected. People listened when he spoke. They asked for advice. They left offerings at the tree, not of fear, but of gratitude. But it wasn't just about them. It was about Elian finally understanding what it meant to be part of something, to be seen, not for his curse, or the whispers, or the legacy of blood, but for who he chose to be. One evening, while walking by the river, he saw Mancario waiting. The old man handed him something wrapped in cloth. Inside was a small stone, a piece of the Kabibi, now dim but still warm. "You're its last keeper now," Mancario said. "The curse is gone, but the power remains. And sometimes it chooses someone to carry it forward." Elian looked at the stone, then at the reflection of his face in the river. "What if I become like her?" he asked quietly. "You won't," Mancario said, "because you're not alone." And he was right. Benjo stayed. Through it all. Even when Elian decided to leave the village for a while, to search for more about his past, to understand the spiral mark and what else it might lead to, Benjo was by his side. Their journey was not one of endless battles or monsters. It became something deeper, seeking answers, healing wounds, visiting old places marked by the curse, and telling stories to those still haunted by it. Wherever they went, Elian shared what he learned, that evil grows in silence, and sometimes what we call a curse is just a wound left too long unattended. And people listened. One night, months later, Elian stood before a small group of children in a distant barrio. They had heard rumors of him, the boy with the spiral heart, the one who faced the black tree. He told them stories, not to scare them, but to teach them that courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about choosing to face the fear anyway. As the children listened with wide eyes, one of them asked, "Is the curse really gone?" Elian smiled. "Some curses end, others transform, but we don't run from them anymore. We meet them together." And when the night grew deep and the fire turned to embers, Elian walked outside and looked at the sky. The spiral on his chest glowed faintly again, not in warning, but in peace. He touched it, then whispered, "Thank you." Because for the first time in his life, he knew he wasn't cursed. He was chosen. And though the darkness still existed in corners of the world, he had become a light that would never again be ignored. The wind brushed past him gently, carrying the scent of old trees and river stones. Somewhere, far away, something whispered his name. But this time, it didn't sound like fear. It sounded like destiny.